assembly, it's vital to understand what part we're actually talking about. The cleaner head itself is this large iron-coloured part on the front of the product. Historically, on other Dyson upright vacuum cleaners, this would have been offered as a single component. However, due to the complexity of DC28, it's now only offered as a much larger single assembly. The clean head assembly contains the clean head, this clear part called the brush housing, the bumper on the front, the brush bar assembly, the clutch assembly, the belt that forms part of the clutch assembly, and all the components behind this cover here, the control, the brush bar height adjustment mechanism. As some components can be easily removed from the clean head assembly without the need to remove the clean head assembly from the product first, these are offered separately and are not offered as part of the clean head assembly. These are the two springs removed by undoing the three fasteners. This iron coloured part here, called the drive cover, that can be easily removed by doing the short screws. And the cover itself lifts straight off the base of the brush housing, and then the drive assembly. This sits underneath the cover. All other parts are offered as part of the cleaner head assembly. The only exception is the bumper on the front of the cleaner head assembly. Although it's offered as part of the cleaner head assembly, it's also offered as a separate component. And can be removed by firmly releasing the 6 catches on the front. You will find, as you release these, you may cause damage to the bumper. That doesn't matter because the only reason you're replacing it is because it's damaged anyway. plate is offered as an assembly and contains sole plate fasteners, sole plate rollers and axles, and rope seal on the underside. The rope seal is also offered as a separate part. It can be very easily peeled out and replaced with new. And then the sole plate rollers and axles also offered as separate components and can be easily removed by prising out using a thin screwdriver. And then new ones just firmly pressed back into position. Because you need to work on the underside of the product when replacing the clean head assembly, you'll find it much easier if you have a level surface to work on. I'll therefore suggest that you remove the cyclone bin assembly from the product first. You then need to remove the post filter cover. You can't remove this without removing suggests, the pre-filter housing assembly contains the pre-filter assembly on DC28. It's only the pre-filter assembly that needs to be washed with the filter washing instructions being every 3 months. The pre-filter housing assembly is offered as one component within customer service that contains the pre-filter housing housing duct seal, the 2 catches, and the springs that sit beneath them, all appropriate graphics. The only exception is the seal that is also offered as a separate component. We easily peeled off and replaced with a new one if necessary. The pre-filter housing removed, you flick the catch on the side, lift off the post filter cover. Then remove the post filter assembly. You can then remove the screw in the post filter hinge. And then carefully prise post filter hinge off the side of the product. I'd also advise assembly from the top of the product. Just slide up the aluminium tube and then remove with a firm pull to release from the top of the duct. If necessary, you can separate the wand handle assembly from the hose by pressing the release catch. Although not essential, if necessary, you can move the hose assembly by pulling the release catch towards you. With all those parts removed, you've now got a level surface to work on when you turn the product over. Before starting to actually remove the clean head assembly itself, you should remove those parts we previously mentioned weren't part of the clean head assembly. offered as part of the clean head assembly. To remove the cleaner head assembly, ultimately we need to disconnect some wiring looms which sit under this black part here called the clutch cover. So we need to remove the internal hose assembly and the air muscle out of the way first. The internal hose assembly can be removed from the brush housing and duct by pulling fairly firmly from either end. Before removing the air muscle assembly, you must remove the wheel from this side of the product first. Simply prise the glamour cap from the wheel and then remove the E-clip. Followed by the wheel and washer. With the wheel removed, you can then remove the axle piston from the side of the product. The axle piston just locks the air muscle onto the rear of the product. You can tie of the end of the short tube. It connects to the side of the air muscle. And disconnect the tube from the air muscle. And then prise the left hand side of the air muscle out from the side of the clutch cover. And remove the air muscle from the machine. The air muscle is offered as an assembly that contains the two halves of the air muscle and the seal. The seal, however, is also offered as a separate component can be replaced if necessary. Just by firmly removing it from the two halves. The easiest way to fit the new seal is to fit it onto the rear half of the air muscle first, ensuring it's adequately seated fit the two halves together. Just ensuring they smoothly align before then fitting the seal over the front half. And once again, just ensure the lip on the seal is adequately seated within the channel. To gain access to the clutch cover, we then need to remove the long and short tube, which means snipping each of the cable ties carefully on the ends. And then removing them from the valve within the brush housing. Then peeling them out of all channels in the clutch cover. The short and long tubes are offered as single components if faulty, the short tube could be replaced at this stage. The long tube, however, hooks and this detail here goes into the side of the lower motor cover, or LMC, and then attaches onto the side of the motor. Replacement of this part will be detailed in a motor replacement section of this film. The clutch cover is held in place with 4 screws. It's also held in the back under this hook detail here on the end of the valve arm. To remove the cover, we need to allow some movement in this valve arm. Currently, the valve arm is locked in place with this valve arm axle here, which can very simply be removed by undoing the screw and then pivoting it up and sliding it out. You can then undo the 4 screws in the clutch cover. When you remove the screws, it's just worth noting in the front here is considerably longer than the other three. With the screws removed, you can then remove the clutch cover. The clutch cover takes quite an amount of force to release from the cleaner head. But basically, it's hooked under the valve arm here. So it's necessary to push the valve arm over to the left-hand side as far as possible, to then hook the detail on the clutch cover from underneath it. It's just a case of knowing that you can be fairly firm with this part without causing any damage. With the clutch cover removed, you can carefully detach the looms from the details on the top of the belt guard. And then remove the belt guard from the clutch. And then detach the clips, the whole the two halves of the looms together. And then slide the belt off the end of the motor spindle. And then the final bit to remove circlips from either side of the cleaner head. With all those parts removed, you can pull the cleaner head assembly back towards the wheels, and then just prise off on both sides